Hey everyone, the video from yesterday, 11/28, did not work so well with the audio and seemed a little choppy. So doing a quick re-record here to fill you in with what's happening and what you have done. So thank you to those who have patiently waited for me to recreate this video. So we are in week 15, and my plan for week 15 is to go through a WDS lab kind of together. WDS stands for Windows Deployment Services, and this is a way in which you can push out an image to, let's say, 10 or 50 or 100 computers. So if you have a large network environment and you need to install Windows, instead of going around to each machine with a USB or a DVD, you can simply take a snapshot of a machine and push that snapshot or image out to a bunch of computers at once. We will probably spend, we spent last Tuesday, we'll spend this Thursday, and probably next Tuesday on it in class. On Thursday, the 9th, I will be doing a review for our final test. So, week 15, WDS lab, half of week 16, finishing up that WDS lab, and then Thursday the 9th I'll be doing a review which I will record as well. So as I mentioned, WDS will allow us to essentially create a snapshot or an image of a machine, and from that image we can then push it out to the network. I went through the slides a little bit more formally in class, and you might be able to pick some of that up off the old video, but I'll just mention a few things here, and then I'll show you what you needed to get done with the hands-on. So this is the slides I'm downloading from week 15 here. So WDS, like I said, stands for Windows Deployment Services, again a way in which you can perform automated network-based installations. It's really all based around this Pixie boot or PXE type of boot. This is a boot that your network card of your system would have to support, and most network cards do. Typically you hit the F12 key in order to make it boot off of the network. So it's pre-Windows, it's pre-any operating system being loaded. And what it does is it boots off the network and it looks for a server that can push it an image. If it finds a server that can push in an image, then an image gets installed onto the PC, and then you have an operating system that's been installed on that machine. In order to use WDS, you need to install the Wds Role, and I'll show you how to do that here in a minute. When we install that, we'll select the deployment and transport services. WDS has a few prerequisites. One is that you have Active Directory installed, which we do. We called it the contoso.com domain. Another is that you have an active Dhcp server. We do not have that yet, and that's what I'll show you here in a minute. We have an active DNS that gets installed when you install Active Directory, so we have that. And then WDS server has an NTFS file system partition to store the images, which we have as well. So we have most of the things done. We just need to install the role and configure DHCP, and that's what we'll do here in a minute. I'm skipping over those screens because we'll see that here in a second. These here as well. So as I mentioned, you must have a DHCP server because you're doing a network boot, and when you boot off of the network you have to have an IP address that's on the same network as that WDS server. So what will happen is we'll have a client boot up, and we'll grab an address from our DHCP server, which puts it on the same network as that WDS machine so that I can see and get the images. And again, I'll set that up here in a minute. The image format that Microsoft uses is a WMI, which is very flexible. How images used to be pushed, and some still are, was a sector-based or a bit-by-bit image of a machine. Now the downfall of doing a sector-based or bit-by-bit image of a machine is that the hardware must match. So if I had an HP ZBook, I would have to create an image of that HP ZBook, and then I could only push it to other HP ZBooks. Because if I pushed it to like a Dell or an HP 360, the hardware layer is different and it wouldn't boot, or you'd get blue screens of death. That's kind of how Norton Ghost used to work back in the day. That was one of the bigger cloning softwares. Well, what they've done now is they've used a file-based image, and a file-based image is a .wmi, or .wim, excuse me, a .wim file. And this allows for more flexibility because the hardware doesn't have to match. I can simply create one image from any machine. Maybe it's a Windows 10 image that has updates and applications and settings, and I can then take that image and push it out to a Dell or a Lenovo or an HP or you name it, and during the process it's going to detect the new hardware and it's going to install the appropriate drivers. So this is a lot better option. In order to make all this work, we have to use a few of these WIM images. We need a boot image and we need an install image. The boot image is what our computer boots off of during that Pixie boot, and the install image is what the computer actually installs. So if you were actually to go into the installation media of your Windows 7, 8, or 10 USB or DVD, you would see a sources folder, and inside of that sources folder there are some images that we can use out of the box if we want. And these images are actually used during a manual process of installing Windows off of a USB or DVD. Typically though, what you would do is you would create, skipping ahead here a little bit, is you would create a capture image. A capture image would be in a scenario where you take a computer, you install Windows, you add all the updates, add any applications like maybe Microsoft Office and Packet Tracer and whatever other applications that you want to have your PCs use. You configure any settings, and then you capture an image or a snapshot of that machine. When you capture an image of a snapshot of a machine, that becomes the install image that you will push out to the other machines. So the machine that you set up and configure is typically known as your target machine. So you take a target machine, install Windows, add all the updates and programs and whatnot, take a screenshot or a capture of it, and then you push that new capture out to the rest of the network. So we have a boot image, which we boot off of. We have an install image, which we push out through the network, and then we have the capture image, which is a snapshot of a machine. I'm going to go back here a little bit. After you get WDS installed, you need to configure it with those images, the boot image and the install image, and you can do that right through the wizard, and we'll see that throughout this lab here. In order to add an image, you have to have an image group created first, and an example of an image group might be like Windows 7 images. You'd put all your Windows 7 images in that group. Another group name might be Windows 8.1 images, and you'd put all your Windows 8.1 images into that group. So those groups have to exist. So that image is going to contain essentially everything that's needed. The operating system updates drivers, installed applications, configuration changes. You'll also hear something about a discover image, and a discover image would be used if a computer does not support Pixie boot. We won't spend a lot of time on that because most computers are going to support the Pixie boot, but if it doesn't, you do have the option to create a discover image. So that would be kind of the fourth image. In order to create a capture image or a snapshot of a machine, you must sysprep it first. So what sysprepping does is it prepares the machine to be cloned or snapshotted. Essentially what it does is strips out anything computer specific to that machine. So if I'm going to create a snapshot of my laptop has a computer name and a CD key, for example. Well, I can't have that same computer name pushed out to 100 computers. The network wouldn't work very well with a computer name that's been replicated 100 times. I also couldn't use that CD key or that product key 100 times because I'd be violating licensing agreements. So the sysprep, what it does is it strips any of that stuff out. Don't perform this on your machine because you're going to end up losing some information. But essentially what you would do is you would do a sysprep, or type it in. Oops, actually need to go to the run first, and then sysprep. And here is the sysprep application. We have a few options. The first option here is the OOBE, or out-of-box experience. If you select that option, the first time the computer boots up after it's been pushed the image, it's going to ask you all of those questions you would see as if you bought a brand new computer. Those questions would be something like, who's going to use the computer? Do you want to turn the firewall on? Do you want to enable automatic updates? You're going to get that out-of-box experience. Then we have the generalize check. The generalize is which is going to strip out everything computer specific. That's usually what you want to select there, is to generalize it. If you don't want the out-of-box experience, you can do what's called audit mode. And then your option down here is after sysprep is done, do you want it to just quit, reboot the machine, or shut it down? So we'll actually do this on our test machine probably on Thursday if we get that far. One thing to note is the way we are doing this in the lab, it's still going to be much of a manual process because we are going to have to answer all of the prompts, like answer the end user, accept the end user license agreement, select the disk partition and size, select the language, select who's going to use the computer. All those different prompts we see when we install Windows, we have to manually answer those. So if you wanted this to be a completely automated process, where essentially you just sit back and hit go and not have to be in front of a computer, you have to create some answer files. What those answer files do for us is they answer all of those questions that are asked of us when we're installing Windows. We're not going to do that here in this class. It just becomes a little bit more complicated than I want, a little bit more time consuming. It's something you can always look up. There's plenty of resources, and once you have those answer files created, you can just kind of use them over and over again. So that's kind of where I stopped as far as the slides were the other day. So what I did next is we had the students configure their server. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm hopping on my server. And I have server 2016. I think most of you guys have server 2012, but there's really no difference in what you're going to see. So that's okay. So let me get logged in here, and I'll show you what you need to get done. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into my server manager. And more than likely when you logged in, server manager probably popped up automatically. And we're going to install the Wds Role here first. So in order to do that, under your server manager, you go to Manage, Add Roles and Features. Try that again here. Okay, I guess it's still thinking, so I'll give it a minute. Alright, once your Add Roles and Features window comes up, it starts up a wizard. You can next to this first option, click Next on the role-based or feature-based, click Next on your server, and then we choose Windows Deployment Services, This window comes up saying add features that are required. Yes, I need to add those features that are required. I hit next, and then the WDS kind of rundown comes up, gives us some things to note, which we kind of already mentioned, and tells us a little bit about what WDS is. We hit next. We do want the deployment and transport server, like we mentioned in the slides. We hit next and then install. So let this go through and install. Alright, so mine finished installing. I can click close. Now under your tools, you should have Windows Deployment Services. And under the Windows Deployment Services, you see your servers. You see your server name there, and it says it's not configured. So we right click on it and we choose Configure Server, and it starts up a wizard. And we want to integrate it with Active Directory, which is typically what's done. It's asking us where do we want to put all the images. Best practice is to put it in a partition that's not the operating system. Typically what I do with my servers is, on a real server I should say, is I'll create like a 100 gig C drive for the OS, and then I'll have all the other storage on a D drive for everything else, like your roles and your data and that sort of thing. So when I hit next here, it's going to give me a warning and saying, hey, are you sure you want to do this? This is your Windows system volume. Well, it's the only volume I have, so I need to click yes. When someone attempts to boot off the network, the Pixie boot, or doing the F12 boot, do we want to respond to them? We're going to choose respond to all clients. We'll hit next here, and it's going to go through and add the files it needs, and it's going to start it up. On this page here, we're going to not add the images now. We'll do that later. But remember, we will have to add for this lab some boot images. We'll get an install image after we capture, and we'll also create a capture image itself. So again, this is kind of some things that are to come, just mentioning those. Alright, the other piece that we needed was DHCP. Now before we install DHCP, we're going to modify the IP address of this server. So I'm going to go into my Network and Sharing Center by right-clicking lower right here on the networking icon. Left-click Change Adapter Settings. You'll find your Ethernet. We'll choose Properties of our Ethernet. TCP/IP version 4 properties, and we're going to use the following address: 10.1.1.1 22255.0. No default gateway. Preferred DNS is the loopback at 127.0.0.1. Hit OK and close. If you want to verify that you got that IP address, you sure can. 10.1.1.1, I knew that address took. So now I'm going to go into Manage. I'm going to add the other role, which is DHCP. Just going through this quickly. You can always pause and rewind the video here if you need to. One thing to note here is you need to be the administrator to complete the next configuration of DHCP. You always want to get in the habit of logging in with the administrator when you're working with Server for Class. Otherwise, you're not going to have appropriate permissions to do certain things. So one way to check to see who you're logged in with is to click on your Start menu. And Windows 12 is going to be, or excuse me, Server 2012 is going to be a little bit different. After you click on the Start menu, upper right here, it should say who you're logged in with. If you're logged in with someone other than an administrator, log out and log in with administrator. Server 2016, you can hover over this icon and I can see that I am the administrator. So once that's done, I can hit close. I get a little yellow exclamation on my notifications and I can complete the DHCP configuration. I hit next here. This will also verify that I am the administrator. If I'm not the administrator, a different name would come up here and more than likely the wizard would error out if you try to continue. I hit commit then, and it tells me done and done. So it authorizes the server, creates the security groups. Again, typically why you wouldn't get done and done is you're not logged in as the admin. Okay, so now under my tools, I will have DHCP. Under DHCP, I expand my servers in IP version 4. I right-click on IP version 4 and I choose New Scope. The new scope wizard comes up, and a scope is essentially a range of addresses that your machine can give out. So I'm going to call this WDS scope. And my starting address is going to be 10.1.1.2. I can't give out 10.1.1.1 because that's the server. Through 10.1.1, we'll go 50. And our subnet mask we chose was a /24 or a 22255.0. See our networking class coming in now. We hit next. This is asking if I want any exclusions or delays. I don't, so we hit next. The lease will leave for the default 8 days, so our devices will get those addresses for 8 days. We'll hit next on yes, I want to configure the following options. There is no router, so if we click next, this should come up with your domain name of contoso.com and then the IP address of your server. We'll hit next. No wins, so we hit next. And yes, I want to activate this scope now. I finish, and now I have a scope. Basically a range of addresses of 10.1.1.2 through 10.1.1.50 that I can give out. That is essentially what we did in class the other day. The last thing I left the students with is they need to have the Windows 10 ISO downloaded. And you may already have it downloaded from previous labs. Typical location is in the Downloads folder. So if you go into your Downloads folder, you may see your Windows 10 ISO. And if you have that, you're good to go for Thursday. If you do not have that, you need to go grab it. And you can grab it from the Microsoft download site. Under week 1, I have a link to get back to that Microsoft download site. It's right here. It says here, and it's an underlined link. You click on that, and it takes you back to the DreamSpark site here. And your login should be an @bismarckstate.edu, and then whatever password you would have created. We sign in here, and it won't let you purchase Windows 10 again if you already have. So if you haven't, you can go through the process of purchasing it, but if you already have purchased it, like most of us should have, you go up to your account name, you choose accounts/orders, you scroll down until you find Windows 10 in your purchase list, you click on it, it gives you the download link. We'll choose download, and then I'm going to do the 64-bit version. If you do 32-bit, that should be okay too, but I'm going to be doing 64-bit example in class. So once you have WDS Role installed, DHCP Role installed, and the Windows 10 ISO downloaded, you are exactly where everybody else in class is. We'll continue with the lab on Thursday.